The autumn rain hammered against the windows of Vanderbilt Medical Center in Nashville, creating rivers of water that distorted the world outside. Inside the pristine lobby, 12-year-old Samuel Whitfield stood dripping wet, his threadbare jacket doing little to protect him from the October storm. His mother, Ruth, worked 2 jobs, cleaning offices at night and stocking shelves at the grocery store during the day, just to keep their tiny apartment in East Nashville. But Sam wasn't here because of money or status. He was here because of a promise he'd made during Wednesday night prayer meeting. "You can't just walk in here demanding to see patients," the receptionist said, her voice carrying that particular tone reserved for people who didn't belong. "This is a private medical facility. Dr. Pemberton's patients are seen by appointment only." Sam clutched the worn Bible in his backpack, the one his late father had given him before the cancer took him 3 years ago. "Ma'am, I understand, but I really need to speak with Dr. Pemberton about his daughter Grace. I know something that might help her." The receptionist's expression shifted from annoyed to incredulous. "Young man, Dr. Pemberton is one of the most renowned orthopedic surgeons in the Southeast. His daughter has been under the care of the best specialists in the country. What could you possibly know that they don't?" Before Sam could answer, the elevator doors opened, and Dr. Theodore Ashford emerged, his Armani suit impeccable despite the late hour. As head of pediatric neurology, Ashford had built his reputation on treating the children of Nashville's elite, country music stars, business moguls, and old Southern money. His eyes narrowed when he saw the wet, disheveled boy standing in his lobby. "Security!" Ashford called out, his voice sharp as a scalpel. "We have an unauthorized minor in the building. Please escort him out immediately." "Dr. Ashford, please," Sam said, taking a step forward. "I just want to help Grace Pemberton. I've been praying about her condition, and I believe God showed me something that could help." Ashford's laugh was cold and dismissive. "God showed you? Listen, boy, medicine is science, not superstition. We don't treat patients with prayers and feelings." The security guard, a kindly older man named Walter who'd worked there for 20 years, approached Sam gently. "Come on, son. Let's get you outside before you get in trouble." But at that moment, the main doors opened again, and Dr. Richard Pemberton wheeled his 9-year-old daughter Grace into the lobby. The girl sat motionless in her custom wheelchair, her legs covered by a soft pink blanket. Her eyes, though, were alert and bright, tracking the conversation with obvious intelligence. When Grace saw Sam, something remarkable happened. She made a sound, not quite a word, but the first vocalization she'd attempted in months. Her small hand lifted slightly, fingers reaching toward the boy. "Grace!" Dr. Pemberton's voice was filled with shock. "Sweetheart, what is it?" Sam knelt down slowly, bringing himself to Grace's eye level. "Hi there," he said softly. "My name's Sam. I think you and I are supposed to be friends." "Get away from her," Ashford commanded, moving swiftly toward them. "Richard, this child broke into the building. He's clearly disturbed." But Grace's reaction intensified. She was trying desperately to communicate, her eyes locked on Sam's with an intensity that made everyone in the lobby stop and stare. "Wait," Dr. Pemberton said, raising his hand. "Grace hasn't responded to anyone like this in 2 years." He looked at Sam with a mixture of hope and skepticism. "Young man, who are you?" "Samuel Whitfield, sir. My mom cleans offices in the Frost building down the street. I've seen you and Grace from the window when you come for her appointments. I've been praying for her every day for 6 months." Ashford scoffed. "Richard, you can't seriously be entertaining this. The boy is obviously seeking attention or money." "I don't want money," Sam said firmly. "I want to share something my grandmother taught me before she passed. She was a missionary nurse in Guatemala for 40 years. She worked with children who had conditions similar to Grace's." Dr. Pemberton studied the boy carefully. Richard Pemberton was not a man given to flights of fancy. He'd graduated top of his class from Johns Hopkins, published over 50 peer-reviewed papers, and performed surgeries that other doctors deemed impossible. But he was also a father who'd watched his daughter's condition deteriorate despite the best medical care money could buy. "What condition do you think my daughter has?" Pemberton asked, his tone neutral but curious. Sam stood up slowly, meeting the doctor's eyes with surprising confidence. "Sir, I believe Grace has been misdiagnosed. What looks like complete lower body paralysis might actually be a severe form of conversion disorder triggered by psychological trauma, not physical damage." The lobby fell silent. Even Ashford seemed momentarily stunned. "That's preposterous," Ashford finally sputtered. "We've run every test imaginable, MRIs, CT scans, nerve conduction studies. The girl has clear neurological damage from the car accident 3 years ago." Sam turned to face Ashford directly. "Dr. Ashford, did those tests show actual structural damage to the spinal cord, or did they show inflammation and irregular nerve signals that you interpreted as damage?" Ashford's face flushed red. "How dare you question my diagnosis? I've been practicing medicine for 25 years. "And you've been treating Grace for 3 of those years with no improvement," Sam replied quietly. "Sometimes God uses the weak to confound the wise, sir." Dr. Pemberton held up his hand again, silencing Ashford's retort. "Samuel, you mentioned your grandmother. Tell me more about what she taught you." Sam reached into his backpack and pulled out a leather-bound journal, its pages yellowed with age and use. "My grandmother, Mary Whitfield, documented cases of children in remote villages who lost the ability to walk after severe emotional trauma. The local doctors called it spiritual paralysis, but she recognized it as a form of conversion disorder. She developed techniques combining physical therapy with emotional and spiritual healing." "This is ridiculous," Ashford interjected. "Richard, I've been Grace's primary physician since the accident. You're not going to trust some child with a notebook over my expertise." But Dr. Pemberton was watching his daughter. Grace had not taken her eyes off Sam, and for the first time in months there was something like hope in her expression. "Theodore," Pemberton said slowly, "remind me again why we stopped the psychological counseling sessions for Grace." Ashford shifted uncomfortably. "They weren't producing results. The trauma from losing her mother in the accident was deemed secondary to the physical injuries." "Losing her mother?" Sam asked, his voice gentle. "Grace was in the car when it happened." Dr. Pemberton nodded, pain flickering across his features. "She was. She hasn't spoken since that day." Sam knelt down again beside Grace's wheelchair. "Grace, I lost my daddy 3 years ago too. Not in an accident, but to cancer. I know how much it hurts. I know how sometimes your body just doesn't want to work anymore because your heart is so heavy." A tear rolled down Grace's cheek. "Samuel," Dr. Pemberton said, his voice thick with emotion, "what would you suggest we do?" "Let me work with her," Sam said simply. "Not as a doctor, because I'm not one, but as a friend who understands loss and who believes God can heal what medicine alone cannot touch." Ashford exploded. "This is malpractice waiting to happen. Richard, you cannot seriously consider letting an untrained child treat your daughter. I'll report this to the medical board." "You'll do no such thing," Pemberton replied, his voice suddenly cold. "Theodore, I'm beginning to wonder if you have Grace's best interests at heart, or if you're more concerned about protecting your reputation." "My reputation?" Ashford's voice rose an octave. "I've dedicated 3 years to Grace's case." 3 years with no progress, Pemberton countered. 3 years of increasing medications, invasive procedures, and declining hope. Maybe it's time to try something different. Sam stood up, addressing Dr. Pemberton directly. "Sir, I'm not asking you to abandon medical treatment. I'm asking you to consider that Grace's healing might need more than what medicine alone can provide. My grandmother always said that we're not just bodies to be fixed, but souls that need tending." Walter, the security guard, who had been silent throughout the exchange, suddenly spoke up. "Dr. Pemberton, if I may, I've seen this boy here every Wednesday evening for the past 6 months. He sits on that bench across the street and prays. Rain or shine, he's there. Never asked for nothing, never tried to come in before today." Pemberton looked at Walter in surprise. "Every Wednesday?" "Yes, sir. Same time as Grace's appointments. I asked him once why he was there, and he said God told him to pray for the little girl in the wheelchair until God told him it was time to act. And God told you today was that time? Pemberton asked Sam. Sam nodded. Yes, sir. During prayer meeting last night I felt it clear as day. Today was the day I needed to speak up. Ashford grabbed Pemberton's arm. Richard, think about what you're doing. Your grief over Margaret's death is clouding your judgment. Don't let some religious fanatic exploit your vulnerability. Pemberton jerked his arm away. Theodore, I think you should leave. You're making a mistake, Ashford warned. When this boy's folk remedies fail and Grace is worse off, don't come crying to me. If they fail, the responsibility is mine, Pemberton replied. But I'm beginning to suspect the only failure here has been our approach. He turned to Sam. Young man, what would you need to work with Grace? Sam's face lit up with a mixture of relief and determination. Just time, sir. Time to get to know her, to understand what she's holding inside. And permission to share some of the exercises my grandmother documented. They're not medical procedures, just movements and activities designed to reconnect the mind and body. Absolutely not, Ashford interjected one final time. I won't stand by and watch this happen. Richard, if you proceed with this insanity, I'll have no choice but to remove myself from Grace's case entirely. Then remove yourself, Pemberton said quietly. Your resignation will be accepted immediately. The silence that followed was deafening. Ashford's face cycled through several shades of red before he turned on his heel and stormed toward the elevator. You'll regret this, Richard. Mark my words. After Ashford left, Dr. Pemberton turned his attention back to Sam. I need to know something, Samuel. Why Grace? Out of all the sick children in this city, why did you feel called to help my daughter? Sam was quiet for a moment, choosing his words carefully. Dr. Pemberton, about 7 months ago, I was walking past this building with my mom. She'd just finished her night shift, and we were heading to the bus stop. I saw you wheeling Grace out to your car, and something just broke in my heart. I saw two people who loved each other, but were trapped in their pain. That night I asked God why bad things happen to good people, and you know what I felt him say? What? Pemberton asked, his voice barely a whisper. That sometimes he allows broken things so that his children can learn to be healers. That he was giving me the chance to use what my grandmother taught me, what losing my father taught me, to help someone else find their way back to wholeness. Grace made another sound, this time clearly trying to form a word. Both Sam and her father leaned in closer. Far, she struggled, her lips moving with tremendous effort. Friend. Dr. Pemberton's eyes filled with tears. It was the first word his daughter had spoken since the accident. Over the next 3 weeks, Sam came to the medical center every day after school. His mother, Ruth, had been hesitant at first, worried about her son getting too involved with a wealthy family's problems. But when she saw the determination in Sam's eyes, the same look his father had when he talked about his calling to teach, she gave her blessing. The sessions started simply. Sam would sit with Grace in the therapy room, not pushing her to do anything, just talking. He told her about his school, about his father's battle with cancer, about the funny things his mother said when she was tired from working 2 jobs. He read to her from his father's Bible, especially the Psalms that talked about God being close to the broken-hearted. Dr. Pemberton watched from behind the observation window, fascinated by his daughter's responses. With the physical therapists, Grace was passive, compliant, but unengaged. With Sam, she was alert, reactive, even attempting to communicate through blinks and hand movements. On the 10th day, Sam brought something special from his backpack, a worn, hand-carved wooden flute his grandmother had brought back from Guatemala. This was one of my grandmother's treasures, he told Grace. She said the children in the mountain villages would play these when they were sad or scared. The music helped them remember they weren't alone. He played a simple, haunting melody. Grace's eyes closed, and for the first time in 3 years, her face relaxed completely. When the music stopped, she opened her eyes and looked directly at Sam. "More," she whispered. Dr. Pemberton nearly fell off his chair in the observation room. His daughter had spoken again, but not everyone was pleased with Sam's progress. Dr. Ashford, though officially removed from Grace's case, maintained significant influence in the hospital. He began spreading rumors that Pemberton had lost his objectivity, that he was allowing a child to practice medicine without a license. "It's negligence," Ashford told anyone who would listen. "When that girl suffers permanent damage from this foolishness, I want it on record that I objected." The hospital board called a meeting. Dr. Pemberton was asked to explain why he was allowing an untrained minor to work with his daughter. "Because he's helping her," Pemberton said simply. "In 3 weeks, Samuel has achieved more progress than 3 years of traditional treatment." "But what exactly is he doing?" board member Patricia Worthington asked. "What's his methodology?" Pemberton pulled out Sam's grandmother's journal, which the boy had entrusted to him. Mary Whitfield spent 4 decades working with traumatized children in some of the poorest regions of Central America. She developed techniques that address the whole person, body, mind, and spirit. Samuel learned these techniques from her. "This sounds like faith healing," another board member said dismissively. "We're a medical institution, not a church." "With respect," Pemberton replied, "we're a healing institution. If something helps our patients heal, shouldn't we at least consider it?" The debate raged for 2 hours. In the end, the board gave Pemberton 30 days. If Grace showed measurable, medically verifiable improvement in that time, they would allow the sessions to continue. If not, Sam would be banned from the premises. When Sam heard about the ultimatum, he wasn't discouraged. 30 days is plenty of time for God to work, he told Dr. Pemberton. "Remember, Jesus raised Lazarus in just one." The pressure was immense. Ashford made sure everyone in the hospital knew about the deadline, turning it into a spectacle. Some staff members began taking bets on whether the faith healer boy would succeed or fail. But Sam remained focused on Grace. He introduced new exercises from his grandmother's journal, gentle movements, synchronized with breathing patterns. Visualization techniques where Grace imagined her legs filled with warm light, and always talking about the accident. It was during the 4th week that the breakthrough came. Sam had been asking Grace to draw pictures of her memories. She could barely hold a crayon, but she managed to make rough sketches. Most were dark scribbles, but one day she drew something different, a picture of herself standing next to her mother, both of them surrounded by light. "Tell me about this," Sam said gently. Grace's eyes filled with tears. Mommy said, be brave." "When did she say that?" "In the car, before." Grace's whole body began to shake. Dr. Pemberton started to rise from his observation spot, but Sam held up his hand, asking him to wait. "Grace," Sam said softly, "your mommy wanted you to be brave. Do you think being brave means walking again?" Grace nodded, tears streaming down her face. "What if I told you that you've already been brave? That surviving, that living with this pain for 3 years, that was the bravest thing anyone could do?" Grace looked at him with wonder. "And what if walking again isn't about being brave for your mommy, but about letting her love give you strength to heal?" Something shifted in Grace's expression. For 3 years, she'd been carrying the weight of her mother's final words as a command she was failing to fulfill. Sam was offering her a different interpretation, that her mother's love wasn't a burden to carry, but a gift to receive. "Can you feel your legs, Grace?" Sam asked. "Sometimes," she whispered. "But I'm scared." "What are you scared of?" "That if I walk, Mommy will really be gone." The truth hit everyone like a thunderbolt. Grace had been unconsciously refusing to walk because in her child's mind, as long as she remained injured from the accident, part of her mother remained with her. Dr. Pemberton was crying openly now, understanding finally why all the medical interventions had failed. They'd been treating the wrong problem. Sam took Grace's hands in his. "Grace, your mommy isn't in your hurt legs. She's in your brave heart. And she wouldn't want you to stay hurt to remember her. She'd want you to run and play and dance, carrying her love with you everywhere you go. Over the next week, Sam worked with Grace on what he called letting go exercises. They were simple movements paired with affirmations. I release the pain, but keep the love. My body is ready to heal. I am brave enough to be whole. Dr. Pemberton brought in a new specialist. Not a neurologist, but a trauma psychologist who understood conversion disorders. Dr. Lisa Brennan was amazed at what Sam had accomplished. This boy has intuitively grasped what many trained therapists miss, she told Pemberton. He's treating Grace as a whole person, not just a set of symptoms. On day 28 of the 30-day deadline, Sam arrived at the hospital to find the therapy room full of people. The entire board had come to observe, along with Dr. Ashford and several other skeptical physicians. Quite an audience, Sam said to Dr. Pemberton. They want to see if you can deliver on your promise, Pemberton replied, his own nervousness evident. Sam shook his head. It was never my promise, sir. It's God's promise. I'm just the messenger. He walked over to Grace, who was visibly anxious with all the people watching. Hey there, princess. Lot of folks here today, huh? Grace nodded, her eyes wide. They're all here because they care about you. But you know what? This isn't about them. This is about you deciding you're ready to receive the healing that's already yours. Sam helped Grace to the edge of her wheelchair and knelt in front of her. I want you to close your eyes and picture your mommy. Can you see her? Grace nodded, her eyes closed. What's she doing? Smiling, Grace whispered. She's holding out her hands. What's she saying? She says she's proud of me, that it's okay to let go now. Are you ready to let go, Grace? Grace opened her eyes, and for the first time in 3 years, they were clear and determined. Yes. Sam stood up and stepped back. Then stand up and walk to your daddy. The room held its breath. Grace gripped the arms of her wheelchair, her knuckles white with effort. Slowly, tremblingly, she pushed herself up. Her legs shook like newborn colts, but they held her weight. Dr. Ashford started to say something, but Walter, the security guard, hushed him. Grace took one tiny, uncertain step, then another. Her father stood 10 feet away, tears streaming down his face, his arms open wide. Come on, sweetheart, he whispered. You can do it. Step by agonizing step, Grace crossed the distance. It took her nearly 5 minutes to cover 10 feet, but when she finally collapsed into her father's arms, the room erupted. Even some of the skeptical board members were wiping their eyes. Dr. Ashford stood frozen, his worldview shattered. Everything he'd believed about medicine, about the superiority of clinical treatment over spiritual care, had just been challenged by a 12-year-old boy with a grandmother's journal and unshakable faith. But Sam wasn't celebrating. He was praying quietly in the corner, thanking God for using him as an instrument of healing. Dr. Brennan, the trauma psychologist, approached him. Samuel, what you've done here is remarkable. Have you ever considered a career in medicine? Sam smiled. My grandmother always said that healing isn't a career, it's a calling. Maybe someday I'll be a doctor, but right now I'm just a kid who listened when God said to help. Over the following months, Grace's recovery accelerated. With proper trauma therapy combined with Sam's continued friendship and support, she progressed from tentative steps to walking confidently, and eventually to running and playing like any other 9-year-old. The story of her healing spread throughout Nashville and beyond. The medical journal articles were careful to couch the recovery in clinical terms. Spontaneous resolution of conversion disorder following integrated psychosocial intervention. But everyone who had witnessed it knew something more had happened. Dr. Ashford eventually requested a transfer to another hospital. The experience had shaken him so fundamentally that he couldn't continue practicing in a place that reminded him daily of his failure to see beyond the physical symptoms. 6 months after Grace took her first steps, Dr. Pemberton established the Mary Whitfield Center for Integrated Pediatric Healing at Vanderbilt. Sam's grandmother's journals became required reading for all staff, and Sam himself despite his young age, was invited to share his insights with medical students. "Medicine without compassion is just mechanics," Sam told a group of residents during one session. "My grandmother understood that healing happens when we see patients as whole people, body, mind, and spirit. You can't fix one part while ignoring the others." One resident raised his hand. "But how do we integrate faith into medicine without imposing our beliefs on patients?" Sam thought for a moment. "You don't have to share my faith to understand that people need hope, that they need to feel seen and valued, that their emotional and spiritual wounds affect their physical health. Whether you call it God or the human spirit or just good psychology, the principle is the same. Treat the whole person, not just the disease." Ruth Whitfield watched from the back of the room, marveling at her son's poise and wisdom. The boy who had lost his father to cancer had found his purpose in helping others heal. The financial struggles continued. She still worked 2 jobs, but something had changed in their small apartment. There was a lightness now, a sense that their struggles had meaning. Grace, now walking and running without any assistance, became Sam's most devoted advocate. She told everyone who would listen about the boy who had helped her when all the doctors had given up. The two remained close friends, their bond forged through shared understanding of loss and the miracle of healing. One day, about a year after Grace's recovery, she asked Sam a question that had been bothering her. "Sam, why do you think God let the accident happen in the first place? Why did my mommy have to die?" Sam was quiet for a long time, pushing her gently on the swing in the park near the hospital. "I don't know, Grace. I asked the same thing when my daddy died, but you know what I learned?" "What?" "That sometimes the worst things that happen to us become the doors through which God's biggest miracles enter. Your accident was terrible, and I'm so sorry you lost your mommy. But look what happened because of it. Your healing has given hope to hundreds of other families. The center your dad built is helping kids who had no hope before." Grace thought about this. So God can use bad things for good? That's what the Bible says. It doesn't make the bad things good, but it means they don't have to be the end of the story. Dr. Pemberton, watching from a nearby bench, marveled at the wisdom coming from a 13-year-old boy. Sam had taught him more about healing in the past year than all his medical training combined. The boy had shown him that sometimes the greatest medical breakthroughs don't come from new drugs or procedures, but from remembering that patients are human beings with souls that need tending just as much as their bodies. 3 years passed. Sam, now 15, had become a regular fixture at the Mary Whitfield Center. He worked with children who had various conditions that seemed to resist traditional treatment. Not all of them had dramatic recoveries like Grace, but each one experienced some measure of healing, sometimes physical, sometimes emotional, always spiritual. One afternoon, a new patient arrived. A 10-year-old boy named Marcus, who had lost the use of his legs after witnessing his older brother's death in a gang shooting. The doctors had run every test, tried every treatment, but the boy remained paralyzed. Dr. Pemberton called Sam immediately. "I think we have another case like Grace's." When Sam met Marcus, he saw the same look in the boy's eyes that Grace had carried. That mixture of pain, fear, and desperate hope, but he also saw something else. Anger. "I don't want your help," Marcus said bluntly. "I don't believe in God anymore. If God was real, he wouldn't have let Tony die." Sam sat down next to Marcus's wheelchair. "You're right to be angry. I was angry too when my dad died. Sometimes I still am." Marcus looked at him suspiciously. "Your dad died?" "Cancer. 3 years of fighting, and then one day he was just gone. I prayed every single day for God to heal him, and he didn't." "So why do you still believe?" Sam was quiet for a moment. "Because I learned that faith isn't about getting what we want. It's about trusting that even in the worst moments, we're not alone. And sometimes it's about being willing to be the answer to someone else's prayer, even when our own didn't get answered the way we wanted." It took months of patient work, but slowly, Marcus began to open up. He talked about his brother, about the guilt he felt for surviving when Tony didn't, about his fear that if he walked again, he'd have to face a world without his protector. Sam never pushed, never preached. He just listened, shared his own pain, and gradually helped Marcus see that healing didn't mean forgetting or betraying his brother's memory. The day Marcus stood up and took his first steps, there wasn't a dry eye in the center. But for Sam, it was just another confirmation of what his grandmother had always taught him, that God's healing often comes through the hands and hearts of those who have known suffering themselves. Dr. Ashford, who had transferred to a hospital in Memphis, heard about Marcus's recovery. He wrote a letter to Dr. Pemberton, the first contact in 3 years. "Richard," the letter read, "I've spent 3 years trying to understand what happened with Grace. I've researched, studied, even attended seminars on integrated medicine. I'm writing to apologize. Not just for my resistance to Samuel's methods, but for my arrogance in believing that medical degrees were the only qualification for healing. That boy understood something I'm only beginning to grasp, that healing is as much art as science, as much spirit as flesh. I was wrong, and that wrongness cost Grace 3 years of suffering. Please forgive me." Dr. Pemberton shared the letter with Sam, who read it thoughtfully. "Will you write him back?" Sam asked. "I already have. I invited him to visit the center to see what we're doing here." "Good," Sam said simply. "Healing isn't just for patients. Sometimes doctors need it too." As Sam grew older, his reputation spread. Medical schools invited him to speak, even though he was still in high school. Journals published articles about the Whitfield method, though Sam always insisted it wasn't his method but his grandmother's, and ultimately God's. But fame never changed him. He still lived in the same small apartment with his mother, still attended the same church, still spent his afternoons at the center, working with children whom traditional medicine had failed. One day, a reporter asked him if he planned to become a doctor. "Maybe," Sam replied, "but being a doctor isn't about the degree. It's about seeing people the way God sees them, not as problems to be solved, but as precious souls in need of compassion. My grandmother never went to medical school, but she healed more people than most doctors ever will. If I do become a doctor, I hope I can be half the healer she was." Grace, now 12 and completely healthy, had started volunteering at the center, working with younger children who were struggling with trauma-related conditions. She had a gift for connecting with them, having walked the path herself. One afternoon, she and Sam were working with a new patient, a 6-year-old girl named Amy who hadn't spoken since a house fire had claimed her family. As they sat with her, Grace suddenly said, "Sam, do you remember what you told me that first day? About being friends?" Sam nodded. That was the moment everything changed. Not the exercises or the therapy, though those helped. It was knowing that someone saw me as more than a broken thing to be fixed. "You saw me as a person worth befriending." Amy looked up at them, her eyes showing the first spark of interest she'd displayed since arriving. Grace knelt down beside her. "Hi, Amy. My name is Grace. Would you like to be friends?" And so the cycle continued. Healing begetting healing, love multiplying love, and the wisdom of an old missionary nurse living on through the children she'd inspired. Years later, when Sam did eventually become a doctor, completing medical school in record time, he hung 2 things on his office wall: his medical degree and a photo of his grandmother. When patients asked about the photo, he would tell them, "That's Dr. Mary Whitfield. She never went to medical school, but she taught me everything I really needed to know about healing." And the Mary Whitfield Center grew from a single wing to an entire building, then to multiple locations across the country. The approach, treating the whole person rather than just symptoms, revolutionized pediatric trauma treatment. Medical schools began incorporating spiritual and emotional assessment into their curricula. Dr. Ashford, who had eventually returned to Nashville to work at the center, became one of its strongest advocates. "I spent 25 years practicing medicine with half the tools I needed," he would tell new doctors. Samuel Whitfield and his grandmother taught me that we can't separate the physical from the emotional and spiritual. They're all part of the same person. Ruth Whitfield lived to see her son graduate from medical school, establish clinics in underserved communities, and train hundreds of doctors in the integrated approach his grandmother had pioneered. At his graduation, she stood up when they called his name, tears streaming down her face, remembering the scared little boy who had watched his father die and somehow found the strength to become a healer himself. In his graduation speech, Sam said something that would be quoted in medical journals for years to come. "We enter medicine thinking we're going to save lives. But if we're lucky, we learn that our real job is to witness the incredible capacity for healing that already exists in every human being. Our role isn't to be heroes, but to be facilitators of the miracle that happens when body, mind, and spirit align in the service of wholeness." Grace was there, of course, now a medical student herself. She had never forgotten the boy who had seen past her broken body to the frightened soul within. After the ceremony, she found Sam in the crowd. "You know," she said, "that first day when you said God told you to help me, did he really?" Sam smiled. "Every Wednesday for 6 months I sat on that bench and prayed, and every time I heard the same message, wait. Then one night at prayer meeting, the message changed to now. Was it God? Was it my own intuition? Does it matter? What matters is that I listened and you walked." "It matters to me," Grace said. "Because if God cared enough about one little girl in a wheelchair to send a 12-year-old boy to help her, then maybe he really does see all of us." "He does," Sam said with quiet certainty. "Every broken heart, every wounded soul, every person the world has written off, he sees them all. And sometimes, if we're willing, he uses us to be his hands and feet, bringing healing to places medicine alone can't reach." Udry. The story of Samuel Whitfield and Grace Pemberton became legend in medical circles, but for those who knew them, it was simply the story of two children who found healing in friendship, faith, and the wisdom of an old woman who understood that medicine without love is just expensive machinery. Today, the inscription on the entrance to every Mary Whitfield Center reads, "Healing begins when we see the person, not just the patient." It's a simple truth, but one that took a 12-year-old boy with unwavering faith to remind the medical establishment of what they had forgotten in their pursuit of clinical perfection. And in churches across Nashville, when parents pray for their sick children, they remember the story of the poor boy who believed God could use anyone to be a healer, and the renowned doctor who learned that sometimes the greatest medical breakthroughs come not from laboratories or operating rooms, but from the courage to admit that we need more than medicine to be truly whole. The rain that had brought Sam to the hospital that first day had been seen as an inconvenience, a disruption to the ordered world of clinical medicine. But like so many things in this story, what seemed like a storm was actually a cleansing, washing away years of prideful assumptions and making room for something new to grow. Sam often thought about that rain when he stood in his own office years later, watching the weather through his window. Every storm reminded him that sometimes disruption is exactly what's needed to bring about transformation. And every time he saw a child in a wheelchair, he remembered Grace's eyes that first day, frightened, hopeful, and ready for someone to see her as more than her diagnosis. The journey from that wet October evening to this moment had been long and sometimes difficult. There had been failures along the way, children he couldn't help, families whose pain was too deep for even faith to immediately heal. But through it all, Sam held on to his grandmother's words. "We plant seeds, Samuel. Some grow quickly, some slowly, and some not at all in our lifetime. But we keep planting, because that's what gardeners do." And so he kept planting, one child at a time, one family at a time, proving over and over again that sometimes the most powerful medicine comes not in a bottle or through a surgery, but through the simple act of one human being looking at another and saying, "I see you, you matter, and you don't have to carry this alone." The story could end here, with success and accolades and lives transformed. But the real ending, Sam knew, was that there was no ending. Every healed child became a healer in their own way. Every family touched by grace passed that grace on to others. The ripples spread outward, unstoppable, unmeasurable, as divine love often is. Grace summed it up best in her own medical school application essay. A boy named Samuel taught me that miracles aren't always sudden and dramatic. Sometimes they're slow and quiet, built from daily acts of faith and courage. He showed me that healing isn't just about making bodies work again, but about restoring hope to hearts that have forgotten how to beat with joy. That's the kind of doctor I want to be, not one who simply treats disease, but one who remembers that inside every patient is a soul waiting to be reminded that they are fearfully and wonderfully made. And in a small church in East Nashville, where Sam still attended when he could, the pastor often told the story of the widow's mite, how the smallest offering, given in faith, could accomplish more than all the wealth in the world. We have our own example, he would say, of a young boy who had nothing to offer but prayer and his grandmother's wisdom, and look what God did with that offering. Ruth Whitfield, now a grandmother herself to Sam's 3 children, would sit in her usual pew and smile, remembering the frightened boy who had watched his father die, who had struggled with faith and doubt, and who had somehow found the courage to believe that God could use even him. Lord, she would pray silently, thank you for showing us that you don't need our perfection, just our willingness. Thank you for Mary, who taught Sam that healing is holy work. And thank you for Grace, who reminded us all that sometimes the patient becomes the teacher. The rain still falls on Nashville, on the medical center, on the bench where Sam once sat and prayed. But now, instead of seeing storms as disruptions, the staff at the Mary Whitfield Center see them as reminders that healing often comes in unexpected ways, through unexpected people, at unexpected times. And somewhere in the city, there's always a child who's been told they'll never walk, never speak, never recover. But now, thanks to a legacy that started with an old missionary nurse and was carried forward by a faithful boy, there's also hope. Not just medical hope, but the deeper hope that comes from knowing that every person is more than their diagnosis, more than their trauma, more than their limitations. That's the real miracle. Not just that Grace walked, or that Marcus stood, or that Amy spoke. The miracle is that their healing became a beacon for others, proof that when medicine and faith work together, when we see people as whole beings rather than collections of symptoms, transformation becomes possible. Sam, now Dr. Samuel Whitfield, still keeps his grandmother's journal in his desk drawer. Sometimes, when faced with a particularly difficult case, he opens it and reads her careful handwriting, her observations about children the world had given up on. And always, he finds wisdom there, not magical formulas or secret techniques, but reminders to look closer, love deeper, and never forget that healing is as much about the heart as it is about the body. The final entry in the journal, written just days before Mary Whitfield passed away, reads, Samuel, my dear grandson, I leave you not wealth or property, but something far more valuable, the knowledge that God uses willing vessels, regardless of their credentials or social standing. You have watched your father fight with courage and faith. You have known loss and pain. These are not burdens, but preparations. Someday, God will use your wounds to heal others. Be ready. Be willing. Be faithful. The harvest is plentiful, but the workers are few. Be a worker, Samuel. Be a healer. And he was.